I'm Dave Fano, founder and CEO at Teal. Teal is a job search platform that is consumer centric. We do not work with employers. We help candidates run an effective job search and land a job they love. I want to thank Reno for inviting me to be part of this event. This is something that we care deeply about, is helping people land jobs. Whether you're in a job that you're not pumped about and you're looking for something new, or you were, part of a reduction in force, whatever that might be, whyever you're job searching, we want to help you be in that new job so you can love your job. And, a lot of things sort of fall into place after that. And a core part of being able to land a job, whether you're applying online, whether you're networking, whether you're getting a referral, is your resume. And I know a lot of people like to make the resume sort of the villain in the job search. And this is coming from someone who hates writing, hates reading, and if I was tested, would probably be dyslexic. The resume is a really important artifact. It is a concise way for you to articulate your value. I think it's also the most fair way. I think, doing things on video, like not everyone's cut out for that. Some people don't want to do that. So I actually think the resume is by far the most egalitarian way to evaluate, because you have complete control of what's on that resume. What you have a little less control of is your time, right? Life just sort of pulls at our time. Today my daughter's sick from school. She's here at the office with me. So my time that I thought I had is different, and that's okay. I want to be able to do that. But the resume is just one of these things that you don't end up having the time for it. And what I see is a lot of the conflict is between what are recommended best practices and just the hours and minutes we have in a day to actually execute on those best practices. So what I want to do now is talk about a little bit of the fundamentals of a resume, how to think about it strategically, and then some tactics that you can take, you can implement to operate a little quicker and, to use some of these best practices. All right. So with that, let's dive in. There's already some Q&A here. Okay, cool. So some of these questions all address sort of in session. So, cool. So I saw this one about how long should you apply for? Should you have photo? Okay, great. Love it. Love these questions. We'll make some of these I'll cover in the content, so we will get into them. So here's a high level of what we're going to do. I want to empower you to quickly and effectively present your best self. That is the goal. And that is really the intention of this session. There's a lot of these questions that people are looking for very tactical responses. It's just much easier. Just tell me what to do. Do I do it or not do it? The thing is, at the end of the day, the hiring process is a very human process, as much as there is sort of jargon around ATSs and bots. That's not really true. The majority of the time, it is a human being. So there are no sort of universal truths when it comes to the job search and the resume, because the person is a person on the other end and they've got opinions, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that so you can sort of inform your judgment and sort of think like they would. But in a quick introduction, we're doing that, some facts and myths, resume sections, the idea of a career history and an application resume, and then we'll wrap up. And then I'll try to get to the Q&A. All right, so mindset. First and foremost, you are a salesperson and the product you're selling is you. And I like to make this distinction because I think the majority of us are pretty comfortable recommending products to people. If we find a movie that's amazing, we find a restaurant that's amazing, we find a product that's amazing, we want to tell everyone about it because we want them to, take advantage of this amazing thing or get to enjoy the experience. When it comes to ourselves, right, we're sort of trained to be humble, to, sort of talk about our participation, not take the credit. The resume is an area of your life where you need to do the opposite. You need to brag. You need to think about this product that's remarkable that you want the world to know about. And in this particular case, that product's you. And you are the best salesperson for that product. So that's why we say you are a salesperson and the product you're selling is you. You really kind of want to internalize that mindset. All right, now let's talk about the job search process more broadly. Right? Yeah, and you So it starts with your planning, kind of like what titles do you want to go after? And this is when people spend a lot of time on their resume. And we're going to talk a little bit about like not too much planning in that part. Then you start to look for jobs. Then you start applying for jobs. And those three, you actually control 100%. You can control your velocity. You can control, your effort, all that. Now, the other two, interviewing and negotiating, are the next two, you don't, right? That's kind of dependent on your inputs. The outputs of number of interviews, number of offers, you don't entirely control that. And then last is the transition from when you got your offer to when you start. And I think you are sort of back in control partially in that process. So the resume really comes into play with applying. And the better you can get at sort of quickly creating these that answer a company's problems, the better your output of more interviews is going to be. All right. So here we want to embody this process, this mindset of also go slow to go fast. And the thinking here is the more preparation we do and the more sort of prep work for our resume, the faster it's going to be to apply and create sort of tailored or bespoke resumes because you're using this career history. It used to be referred to as a master resume if someone's heard it talked about that way. We generally don't talk about it that way anymore. So we really try to call it a career history. But if you've heard of it, this sort of paradigm of working as a resume, you might have heard it talked about that way before as well. All right, so some facts and myths. Recruiters will spend 7.4 seconds on average looking at your resume. This is a stat that you see referenced all the time. It comes from a study that was done years ago by the Ladders, where they put eye tracking software on recruiters. Look, I don't know how true it is. I think a lot of people really want to like hone in on this. But what I say is think about when you're skimming the internet. Think about when you're looking at a product. Think about when you're doing things, when you're thinking about buying a book, right? You go through a process. It's not that recruiters or hiring managers fully ingest a resume in under 6 seconds. It's a series of kind of yeses and nos. And what you want to do is keep making it to the next stage of that kind of mental model that someone's going through. So typically what they do is a very fast skim. It's like, okay, if that's a yes, I'm going to keep reading. Then they go one level deeper and they say, okay, cool. And then they'll go one level deeper and then they'll make their decision. I think it's kind of generally like in 3 chunks. Again, this is just like my intuition. I just looked at hundreds of resumes for jobs that we were filling. And that's what I could see myself doing. I would skim real quick. And if it was a no, immediately out. And there was just like a few key things I was looking for, and those are different for everybody. And then if I was like, okay, cool, let me go a little longer, then I'd sort of skim a few more things. I said, okay, if it was a yes, then I would really go down and like read every single bullet, and then I'd make my decision whether to move them forward in the process or not. So the main takeaway is you need to catch someone's attention quickly. Right. That's just kind of how it works. That's how advertising works. That's how social media works. You need a hook. You got to catch people. If you don't, they're not going to keep reading. So ignore the 7.4 seconds. You don't need a stopwatch. But if you don't get a person's attention quickly, they're just not going to keep reading the rest of your resume. I think that's the most important thing to take away from when people are talking about how much time you have. The truth is 6 seconds is actually a fair amount of time when you sort of like sit there and count it out as 6 Mississippis. It's not that short. But I think the key thing is, are you landing like an impact quickly? All right. Applicant tracking systems, or ATSs. There's a lot of fear mongering out there with the ATS and that an AI and a bot is knocking you out. It is generally not true. I don't want to speak to every single piece of technology and every single company out there, just so I make sure that I'm not sort of lying. But the majority of recruiters that I've spoken to, AI is not screening candidates. There's a lot of practical reasons. Honestly, most recruiters don't trust any kind of automation because they want to source the best candidates. They actually want to look at them themselves. Right? They want to make sure they're doing their job and bringing in the best candidate. They don't want to miss out on somebody. So, but I will say that some of the technologies out there have made it very, very easy, almost too easy for people to apply. So something like LinkedIn Easy Apply, what that does is it makes it so easy for someone to apply that the signal to noise ratio becomes unbearable. And, a job gets 500, 600, 800 applicants. So they do need to implement things to help screen those faster. And they will ask what they call knockout questions. Again, that's not an AI. If you answer a question in a way that, in a binary way fails a requirement, then of course you're going to be out. And so job descriptions do have a requirement section that's often called minimum qualifications. So if you don't meet a minimum qualification, of course, you're going to be knocked out. That's not an AI. That's not a bot. That's not a guessing game. It's clearly articulated in the job description. And a lot of times companies cannot waver on those minimum qualifications. There's legal implications. There's a lot of complexities around that. If you want like the ins and outs, I would highly recommend you follow Amy Miller on LinkedIn. She talks a lot about sort of governmental regulations. If you take government funding, how you cannot do that. You would have to go and literally change the job posting if you were going to bend on any of these requirements. So that's where I'd say really focus your energy is look at the qualifications that are required by the job. It's not the ATS. ATSs are not going to be the things that pop you in and out. Now, there are some aspects of the ATS that I think you should be mindful of, which is like when it comes to your resume is the parsability. And what that means is that the text in the resume can be sort of scanned or read by the computer. What that allows for is like very simple search. Say I've got a database of resumes and I want to look for someone that was a product manager. I can then search that very explicit term in that text. Again, it's not an AI. It's not doing anything fancy. So you want those words to be parsable. And you can do things like by making a resume in Canva and where it's like a graphic and it's an image and it's what are called pixels, which is just sort of like images. Like a photo, and it's not actually text. And so very technical things. So those are things you kind of want to look out for because it may look normal on the screen, but then it's not parsable and it has to do computerized character recognition, which could fail and ultimately you lose out. Again, that's not an AI finding you. That's just making sure that the keywords and the text that correspond with like what a recruiter would be searching for in the JD is on your resume, which we will talk a little about keywords in a little while. All right. Your resume is your pitch. So do the number of pages matter? Again, this is something that people really harp on. It's got to be one page. I would not focus on the sort of empirical aspect of 1 page, 2 page, 3 page. It goes back to, are you making the case for why they should hire you as quickly and concisely as possible? So what I tell everybody is if the first half of the first page is not good, they're not going to read the whole first page. And if the whole first page is not good, they're not going to read the second page, right? So it doesn't matter. And what I think what is kind of an implied indicator is if your resume is 10 pages long, you're probably not like editing and curating the information very well, right? You got to remember that the job of your resume is to get you an interview. It's not to get you the job. All those things you will discuss once you get into the interview process. So your resume needs to be a fast pitch for why they just move you forward in the process to get you to the screening. That's its job, get you to the first interview. So you want to make it as concise and punchy as possible. So generally, if you can make that happen on 1 page, then great. The other thing I'll tell you is whoever opens your resume, they will for sure read the first page, right? There's no guarantee they're going to read the second page. They may not flip, they may not. So I do think just like make sure that the first page is outstanding and operate from a place of they're going to make their decision off the first page only, whether there's 2, 3, 4, that's not going to get you the job or not. I promise you, no one's going to knock you out just because you had a 2-page resume. That's going to be more of an indicator that you weren't able to sort of concisely sell yourself on that first page. Okay. So let's take a pause here. Let's look at some questions. Let's make sure I didn't miss anything. Wait, Wade said he couldn't hear me. Are other people hearing me, not hearing me? Given that I got other questions, I'm guessing people could hear me. So, okay, cool. Great. Sorry about that. All right, great. It's a little late. How do you scan job postings? I'll talk about that in a little while. Yes, I think it's being recorded. I'm pretty sure. I don't want to speak for Reno and the Wise full team, but I'm guessing it is. All right, cool. How far back should you go? I'm going to talk about that. Good. Reno just said it's being recorded. We'll be talking more about using Teal. Yes. Okay, some of these. All right, cool. I'm going to cover those in some of these sections. Alrighty. So resume sections. We're going to talk about kind of the anatomy of a resume here, and kind of why you may use some of these sections. So at a high level, these are your sections. I'm going to go into each one, and then there's additional sections that you can use as necessary. But more broadly, I'm a huge fan of keep it simple. KISS. Keep it simple. Don't get too fancy with your resume. Don't spend a lot of time decorating the box and designing the box. Focus on the content, what's inside the box. I see so many people getting really hung up on making it pretty and making it stand out. That's not how you stand out. Really, the content is how you stand out. All right, so contact info. Best practices here. Keep it super simple. First name, last name, any kind of accreditations if you want. City, state, you don't have to list your address. An email, be mindful of the email. If I'm still using my email from when I was in high school, slick dude 405, like that's not great, so have a professional looking email. Think about that, and sort of, people are just judging all the little micro pieces of information on this document to ultimately make the decision. Like one of the things I like to say is there's a yes-no scale in someone's mind when they're looking at a resume and they're putting on yeses and they're putting on no weights. And if the no's like start to tip to a certain point, like that's it, you're out. So don't give them any reason to be like, is this person someone I kind of want to be working with that I think is going to help us? So just eliminate all these things. Simple email, phone number, and then have a LinkedIn address. I think today, in today's day and age, for a sort of office position, if you don't have a LinkedIn, it just raises an eyebrow. It's like, why don't you have a LinkedIn? You may have a very valid reason for not having one, but I really, really recommend that you have one. And then when you do, customize your URL so it's like not long and gnarly. And the other thing I would say is make sure to include the full URL. What I see some people do is just put LinkedIn as a live link. And the risk you run is if the link breaks, now they don't know your LinkedIn URL. So you can make it a live link, but make sure at the very least you include in and then your URL, a handle or tag. All right, that's the contact info. A professional summary or a blurb. I am a big fan of professional summaries. There are a lot of people that are not. The one place I would say not to do it is if you've only had one job, there's really nothing to summarize. I think the real power of a professional summary is your ability to talk about your career in aggregate. If you've been in sales, you've had 3 jobs, this is a place for you to put together some really big numbers of like the aggregate sales you had at those 3 jobs. This is a place for you to name drop the various clients you worked with at each of those companies and concisely put it in there. So I really like it as your kind of written elevator pitch. Don't make it any longer than 4 lines. It should be brief and tight. And the other thing I like that it's paired with is a target title. Again, an area that, again, everything is sort of subjective when it comes to the resume. So I'll give you my reasons for why I think it's important. A target title, especially for someone who's career pivoting, is your opportunity to channel the position you want. Because maybe you've never had that position, and not even necessarily career pivoting. If you are trying to strive and ascend, all your positions are project manager, project owner, and you want a senior product manager position. Well, you can't change your titles for the past. I mean, you can if you want to, but here you're saying, this is what I'm applying for. This is what I'm projecting to you, that I am this position. So I really love a target title. It gets those keywords on there if a recruiter is sort of searching the database based on the title that the open rec is for. So I really like a target title, and which is different than a LinkedIn headline. I'm not going to talk about LinkedIn. This really should be the target title. I often say if there's going to be one thing that you customize on a resume, just put in the title of the job you're applying to. Like, that's it. Just do that. If you don't tailor anything else. All right. So that's the blurb summary. We have a little Google sheet that is what we call a blurb builder. We'll link to it. It's free. You shouldn't even need any credentials to get to it. But it's got kind of like this like Mad Libby interface that helps you structure it. So that'll be there. You can check it out. When you click a link, you go out of full screen. There we go. Okay. Next is your work experience. And so again, I've got this whole thing is my opinion, so I'll stop saying that. And I'll talk about some really easy ways to sort of change these things. But my recommendation is that you group your work experience by company, not by position. I've done polls on this. It's really 50-50. So do not take this as a, like, you must. This is my opinion, and I'll tell you why. If you've had multiple positions at one company and you start to put the date ranges per position, and someone doesn't really take the time to process the information and they're just looking at the positions, they may think you're job hopping, because by definition, the date ranges on those will be lower, right? Because you'll be each position. So you can be thinking, well, I want to show that I progressed in the company and I was moving up. My opinion is that you kind of run the risk of someone not realizing that that is an aggregate time at one company and that you job hopped. So I like date range, start, of the first position, end of the last position, or present at the company. It maximizes the appearance of tenure, the optics of tenure. And companies care about that at the end of the day. It's a non-issue. I think we should all just sort of acknowledge that you're going to be at a company for 2 to 3 years, but they like the idea of tenure. So let's give them what they want and not run the risk of them confusing it. So I like that. So you want the company. I would use the most known version of the name of the company. So if you are at a company that got acquired, in the acquirer is a bigger name, use that. What you want is familiarity bias. The position you had, one thing to think about here is if your company sort of got cute with positions and changed them and it's not a normative title, I would maybe either put the normative title in parentheses or the actual title in parentheses. So I saw once that a person was director of first experiences or something, and the person was an executive assistant. So, and someone hiring is going to be looking for an executive assistant, not director of first touches or something. It was like, and so be mindful of that. The job titles do matter in how people are looking for them. So those are places that I think you can take some liberties. You don't need to be too rigid about how the company used the title. Now, don't change it entirely, but I do think that's something you can do. All right. So, and then location. Again, I like location actually at the company. If you want to put it at the per position level, you can. I'll show you how some of these things are just settings in the Teal resume builder in a minute. Achievements. So I call them achievements instead of bullets. Achievements have a particular structure. They talk about your impact that you had while you were there. And I think achievements are an ability, is a moment for you to prove that you have the skills. So again, thinking about the judgment, why is this company even hiring in the first place? Why is this position open, right? The company has a gap that they either don't have the time or resources internally, or that they have a complete lack of knowledge. And so what I need to do as a company now is I need to fill that gap. I've got an objective, and I am of the belief that hiring a person who has certain abilities, has certain experiences, is going to accelerate my ability to achieve these goals, right? Your resume needs to get them excited about you being that person that's going to help them achieve their goals. And there's a lot of psychology in this. It's not as logical as I think people think. So the JD is the area where the company is listing out all their problems, whether they're doing it explicitly in the form of requirements or they're doing it in sort of implicitly in the form of responsibilities, right? You will be responsible for choosing, managing, and deploying our new CRM software. Well, clearly they're not happy with their current CRM situation because they wouldn't even be thinking about doing that. So you need to prove that you're the person that can do that. And I think achievements are the place that you do that. People do sort of infer a lot of that from the job titles, but your achievements are really where the final decision is going to be made. Do I bring this person in or not? So you need to make that as robust as possible and not just kind of descriptive. So worked with tech team to increase web traffic. It's like, okay, I mean, it's a little like you sort of show a little bit of your impact. A worse version would be, managed the company website. That tells me nothing, right? And so just these descriptive statements really kind of lack punch. And I'm like, okay, anyone could say that. If you can start to include measurable results, one, we just kind of inherently trust numbers more. And we say, well, if you put it in numbers, that means you measured it. It just must be true. We're all kind of susceptible to that. So let's also lean into that. So if you said something like grew engagement by 200%, which led to doubling revenue in 3 months. All right. So now we're talking about what we did and the impact we had. These you can also structure differently. You could say doubled revenue in 3 months by growing engagement by 200%. So you can sort of reorient these and whatever works for you, but you want to think about what you did and the impact it had. All right. So a success verb, the thing that was affected, the metric by how it was affected, and then the outcome it had to the business. You don't need to include all of these, but I would say you want to include 3 out of the 4. So there's your success verb. I grew it. That's the impact I had. What was it? The engagement, which, if I was applying to a retention marketing position or something, that would be really important. You want to look for those words in the JDs, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The metric, and then the outcome it had on the business. You could drop the outcome, grew engagement by 200%. That's a little light. Now I might hear how you did that. Or you can kind of leave, do the outcome. I think those are 2 different ways you could do that. So having the metrics really builds the proof. It just becomes that much more believable. The immediate thing I always get is, well, what if I don't have metrics? It wasn't measured. So my general response to that is no one's going to audit you. It doesn't need to be super specifics, but if the language makes you uncomfortable, you can include things like approximately, around. You could sort of round down and then do plus, over 30%, things like that. So you can loosen the language a little bit. That's one option. That would be my preferred approach if you don't have the exact numbers. And the other is you can use more qualitative metrics language like increased, improved, resulting in an increase in profitability, things like that. If you don't want to put exact numbers, I think that's significantly worse than the sort of looser language, but it's still better than, non-qualitatively improving language. So here's some examples of some of the job responsibilities you may have had, right? And people will often, planned events for corporate retreats, or, organize a sold out charity event for 300 people and raised $500,000. If I was applying to a nonprofit and part of my job was to do fundraising, I definitely want the person on the right? They've shown they can do that. And it shows they understand the job and they understand the success metrics they had for their position. I won't read all these, but you get the idea, right? You've got what you affected and the impact it had on the business. Every single one of these do that. We have in the Teal Resume Builder, which I'll show you, an achievement assistant, which can help you with some of this. So I'll do a demo in just a second. So a couple other tricks for your resume. Writing achievements is prompts. Think about some of these things. Did I make the company money? Did I save the company money? I'll show you some prompts that are built into Teal in a second. Another tip is look at the job description, whether it's the responsibilities, the requirements, the sort of minimum requirements or preferred, and just add a question mark at the end of each bullet. I know it sounds stupid, but just even in your mind, putting in the right sort of inflections, right? Experience managing an annual P&L marketing budget. Sometimes you may say, do you have experience managing an annual P&L and marketing budget? Or tell me about a time where you experienced managing an annual P&L marketing budget. Then you can use that as a prompt for yourself and be like, oh yeah, I did do that. And you can write it out. I would say another thing when it comes to your resume that I see people do is they conflate curation and creation. And in the context of making resumes, that's very hard to be creating and curating, right? You're writing and editing at the same exact time. And I think our brains really struggle to do both of those. So what I would recommend is do this and be in creation mode. Just list it out exhaustively. Do bullets, do long form text, whatever's comfortable for you. Then once you have that, switch over to curation, and then you can start to edit them, cull them down. But this is a great way. And I'll show you how you start to sort of log all this in your career history. Leverage language. Be thoughtful about language. I'll give a very silly example, but if I grew our customer base from 1 customer to 2 customers, that's not compelling. But if I say I grew our customer base by 100%, that's interesting, right? And the resume is a place where you can do that, right? You can articulate that and then eventually in the interview. So 1 to 2 on its own as absolute numbers is not that interesting, but you can say, hey, grew our customer base by 100%. And those were actually 2 enterprise customers. And there was a 12-month sales cycle for each one. And it actually quadrupled our revenue, right? But think about the narrative that the metrics tell. And you really, I know this feels like a lot of work to be sort of this focused on the language, but it really matters. This is your sales pitch. And you don't, and we'll talk a little bit about like, as you do this effort, you won't have to keep redoing it because you're just going to create a main archive of all your achievements, and you can be this focused and nuance them. But the story that numbers tell really helps sort of the perception of the impact. So think about that. And then lastly, look at other people. Go to other people's LinkedIn profiles. We live in an incredible time where a lot of these things are online. And so look for someone who has the job title of the job you're applying to. Go look at their LinkedIn and look at how they describe the responsibilities. Even better, look for someone who has the job title or had the job title at the company you're applying to, and see if they have achievements in their profile. And then that can give you some inspiration. I know that a lot of times with achievements, it's just inspiration. People do a lot of really incredible things, but when it comes that time to document it all and put it on your resume, you sort of hit a roadblock. You're like, I don't even remember what I did. So these are great ways to get the wheels turning and to get inspiration for how you would write your achievements. All right. Education section. Don't overcomplicate this. Super, super simple. The main difference is if you're fresh out of school, right? Then this is going to be sort of like one of the more pressing, like more important areas. So you can emphasize that and put your field of study and things like that, and maybe put a little more substance behind your degree, but otherwise keep it pretty simple. And then additional information. So skills, like I really like a skills section, and I like this is a recommendation I got from Mark Candella's book, who was the founder and CEO of The Ladders. It's just a comma separated list of words. I see a lot of people get really fancy with just a bullet of word, like bulleted list, putting in like how good they are at it. I really recommend against any of those things. What I want is just like a concise view of the abilities you have. I'd say, the more senior position, generally the more like soft skills and leadership skills they're going to be looking for. The more technical or individual contributor position, the more like technical language they're going to want to see, like tools. So one thing I like being a little exhaustive here, but ultimately the JD is your guiding light for what you should put here. If the company speaks in terms of technologies, so we use Tableau, Google Data Studio, SQL, Python versus data analysis, data cleanup, data warehouses, right? One is sort of speaking in verb and task form, and the other one is speaking in noun and technology term. So map to them and sort of, use the language that they use and call that out. At the worst case, do both. All right. Additional sections that you may want to include. Again, I would use these sparingly, but if you need them, you've got certificates and licenses. Those tend to be good for career pivoters who want to show that they've got the abilities, but they don't necessarily have the work experience. Training and continuing education. If you're in a place that like requires certifications and you want to show that you have them that are more sort of robust than other things, you might want to do it. Special awards and commendations. Again, I think these tend to be a little better more early in your career as a way to stand out. Or if you're in a field that these things really matter, then you need citations. Publications, again, if you're in a field, if you're an AI researcher and you want to show that you've been published in a great publication, those things can help. Charity work or volunteer work tends to be better, again, earlier in your career, unless it maps specifically to the JD, right? If you were a product manager and you worked at Noom in the fitness space, and you want to apply for a product manager position at Spotify, and part of your volunteer work is teaching kids music on the weekends, look, that's interesting. That connects to their theme, then maybe you want to do it. But if you were applying to a health tech company, I probably wouldn't include it because it's just taking the space, and I don't think it really helps build the case. And then projects tend to be good for more, project-focused things like design, where you have like a portfolio. Sometimes it's helpful. Not necessarily, I think, critical. And then personal projects tend to be good for pivoters as well. All right. So let's see here. Let's talk real quick about how we doing on time. We're 12:37. Okay, cool. Some of this. Yeah, so I want to talk, I just may do this as a demo instead. So at a high level, I want to make a distinction between what I'm calling your career history and an application resume, right? And your career history really should be this exhaustive place where you document everything you've ever done. And you may have previously heard this referred to as a master resume. We don't call it that anymore. But you want to have this place where you document everything you've ever done. You really want it to be exhaustive. And then you want to create filtered views of that for an application. And this is the go slow to go fast thing. If you build out this career history, it becomes very fast and easy. Now, I'm going to show you how you can do it with Teal. This is free. There's no sales pitch here, but you could also do this with a Google Doc. You could do it with a Word doc. What I recommend is you have a document that's got everything you've ever done, and then you can very quickly do a save as and just erase the things you don't need, or you can very quickly copy paste from it. It's going to really save you a lot of time, and it's going to increase the efficacy of your job search. So let me show you how you would do that with Teal. All right, so this is the Teal resume builder. And like I said, everything here is free. Everything about I'll show you anything that's part of Teal Plus. I'll show you, but right now, everything I'm showing you on the screen is free. So on the left of your screen, you have what's called your career history. And the idea is that this be exhaustive, everything you've ever done. So you can see I've got multiple target titles that I'm applying to, multiple versions of my professional summary, lots of resume achievements. We can add some here as we go. I've got my work experience. I've got a lot of skills. Right. And what you're seeing next to each of these is checkboxes. So now I can have this one log or index of everything I've done. And for a particular job, I can say, well, you know what? This achievement doesn't make sense. Or I saw in this particular job description that they called out, instead of brand awareness, they called it, community engagement. All right. So let me go ahead and I'm just going to copy. We're going to add a duplicate feature here soon, but for now, I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to add an achievement. I'll paste it in, and here I'll call it community awareness. No need for that to be. Oh, here we go. It's got built-in spell check, but I also have Grammarly, which I highly recommend for anyone job searching. Right. So even that, they're almost identical, but for one job, I want it this way, and this one I want another. If you were doing this like Google Docs, that kind of becomes annoying, but this becomes super easy. And now you have that for every job you apply to in the future. So you have now your resume over here on the left, and you can quickly say, okay, I'm going to do that, but you know what? I actually want to put that here. Another thing that I see get missed a lot when I review resumes is the order of bullets. People just say, oh, I'm just going to get 3 achievements on there. No, it doesn't work that way. People read the first one, and if that one's good, they read the second one. And if that one's good, they read the third one. So make sure that your first bullet is the best bullet, right? It's got the most metrics. It's the most impactful. So make sure you think about that, and this allows you to quickly change that. Or there may be one that's more relevant for a particular job. So then you can change that on a per job basis. All right. So that's building this out. If you want to then build out achievements, we've got this achievement assistant. We've got some general guidelines on best practices for an achievement. We've got the assistant, which is more of a kind of like Mad Libs approach. So, if the word's not there, you can just type it in. This is just meant to help you. So grew, let's just say like revenue by 150% in, let's call it 18 months. By, designing and launching a new onboarding strategy. All right, so I save that. And then achievement just got added. And so there you go. So you can use that, and you saw sort of building out at the bottom. The other thing we have, like I said, in that deck are things like examples and prompts. We're going to be launching very soon some like AI generated ones where you give it the JD just to help you. I don't think anyone should use AI stuff directly. It's just not that good, and you run the risk of, putting a lot on the line. But I do think it can get you like second base pretty quickly and help you then edit. As someone who like struggles with like the blank sheet of paper, that I've been testing some of these tools, and they're very helpful for that. And AI tends to be very good at summarization and synthesis. All right. As part of and this is how you then create application resumes. So the left is essentially your career history, And if you go over to your resume builder, you can just make new resumes very quickly. And each one is its own bespoke thing. You can pick the target title you want for which one. I'll use that summary on this particular one, or in this case, I'll use this summary. And for this one, I'll have, that achievement and that achievement. And so it's all still pulling from that main database that is your career, but you can very quickly create bespoke one-off resumes per job. All right. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is attach it to a job. So right within this resume builder, we have a tool called the Job Tracker, which is also free. I'll show you that real quick. So here's your Job Tracker. And the way this works is you bookmark jobs on LinkedIn or over, I think, like 40 different job boards at this point. So here you're seeing some Teal Plus features. I just want to be clear about that. You get the top 5 skills included on a free account, which is more than enough to get going. And you'll see the skills, but you can just kind of use language. You can see, where's the company calling out key skills, but you can very quickly bookmark jobs. The way you do that is on LinkedIn. If you install the Chrome extension, this little duck will show up on the right. You just click it, and then it'll pull in all this information. You save it, and it comes over. It gives you the top 5 skills. So those will be on your job tracker. So then any job you save in your job tracker, that's like a whole separate workshop on managing your job search. But those jobs are now available in your resume builder. If you come over to the matching mode, you can pick a job and you can sort of switch a different one. I recommend 1 job per resume. But now those are here. This also has some Teal Plus features. You get the top 5 for free. Then all the additional keywords are paid. We're committed to someone being able to run an entire job search for free. So, but we also got to figure out a way to make money. So the bulk of the platform is free, but there's a few little things. If you want the extra, then that's charged. But it pulls over your notes from the job that you might have put in the job tracker, but you do get the JD. It just won't, again, it'll have the top 5 skills, but you can now at least see the JD side by side as you're making achievements. So you can come in here, you can turn these off or if you want just the hard skills, let's say. The other idea is this concept of emphasis words. These words were like key, requirement, expert. The company is using language to say, hey, this is important to us. So you could kind of hone in on those and say, okay, here, requirements and proof of execution and branding requirements. Okay, I'm going to write an achievement that addresses that. I saw one of the questions earlier is how do I identify what keywords matter? Well, here the company is telling me expert and requirements. This really matters to them. All right, let me make sure I address that in this particular job that I'm applying to. But for other companies, that may not matter. So I may not do that. All right. And then you can also then do an analysis on a per resume basis. And this is kind of like Grammarly for your resume. It'll give you, there's basic analysis, which is free, checks for sort of general best practices. And if you want more detailed analysis, that's part of Teal Plus as well. All right. And then lastly, we'll talk about formatting. So some of the things that I talked about as my opinion, again, some of these things are, 6 one way, half dozen the other. You ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 different answers. So what we've done is we've made these settings. What I tell people is do whatever makes you the most confident, right? I'd say like this, the key secret weapon to a job search is confidence. You need to be confident that you can do the job. The person on the other end needs to feel confident. Remember, they work at this company. If they're a recruiter, they want the company to win. So I need to feel like in my heart of hearts that you being on my team is going to increase our collective chances of winning. And if you're not confident, if you're coming in saying, well, I don't know if I could do that. Well, I don't, could you imagine going to a doctor's office and about to have heart surgery and you say, hey, is this going to work? And they say, well, I haven't done this before. I'm not sure. That's not the doctor I want operating on me. Now, I'm not saying to lie. But assuming you are qualified for this position, you need to present it with confidence. So change the settings and do whatever makes you feel the most confident. So simple things like dates on the right or left. Personally, I like them on the left so my eye doesn't have to jump around. But if you want it on the right, great, you can do that. If you want it on the left, It's just a setting. You don't have to change entire templates now, which is one of the things that I think is really tricky. So here's an example of another. I ran a poll on LinkedIn. I think I got 500 different results. Should I group my jobs by position or by company? It was literally 50-50. So do what makes you more confident. Personally, I think by company is better, with the date ranges by company. That's my preference. That's what I think, shows the longest tenure. But if you want to group work experience by position, no problem. It's just a setting. The date ranges will then sort of by definition be by position, by position. But if you want to do both, you can do that too. Date formats. I don't think it matters. I don't think the ATS cares. I don't think a lot of recruiters care. But if you want to show the full date because that's the full month, because that's what makes you happy, no problem. Just a setting. You want to do an abbreviation, you can do that. It's a number. And then we've got a few things that we've tried to sort of simplify, like margins. And, we've kind of baked in the inability to make a non sort of best practice resume. So things like I saw a question earlier about profile pictures. In the US, I think internationally, this is seen a little differently, but in the US, it's generally frowned upon. It makes it very susceptible to bias. The ATS is, when they do parse, is going to take that part out anyway. So it's generally not recommended that you have a photo on your resume. So we don't have that feature in here, and things like that. And then like color doesn't really break it, but also not a place to go crazy. So if you want to add like a little splash of color, no problem. And then there's 4 different templates. You can change different fonts if you want more of this like traditional style resume. There you go. It's all there. Oh, and then you can reorder your sections. So if you're a student, you probably want to put education first. Then your work experience. You should not have a professional summary if you're a student. So then you can just sort of go back over here and turn that off. And that's it. And so that's how you can go in and customize it, and you can very quickly do it. But the key thing is to have that main database of everything you've achieved. Now you can do that go slow to go fast. Spend that time, even if you're getting job descriptions that you're not necessarily going to apply to, but to do that process of adding a question mark at the end to just get it all out. Think about all the awesome things you've ever done and just get them all into this main database of your career history. Now you'll be able to very quickly apply. As you're applying to new jobs, you'll see new requirements that you'll add things for, and it'll just get faster and faster. And it'll really be like a compounding positive effect on your ability to create tailored job applications very, very quickly. All right. So I think I covered most stuff in the deck. That was this whole section. I just wanted to show it in sort of in context. And yeah, I showed the tools. All these things are automated now, so you can sort of do that stuff, but we'll share a version of this deck. So with that, let me stop my screen share and let me address some of these questions.